I know you were. Oh my God. Oh, I know. Screaming louder than the coach. Oh, gotta tell that. That's exciting.
Hey, hey guys, how are you? Hey,
Is that my plat?
you guys doing?
That my plat?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, before you go, oh, good afternoon. Haven't seen you. What do we need to call you about people taking our property? Market Street is all businesses are losing their parking right now.
Hey,
That lot,
okay.
they boarded up all the parking lots. They're tearing up, they're taking people out and now.
Who said we need night meetings? We have an audience.
Right, when it's important enough.
If something important to you, you'll come.
Could we
I,
come to order, please? I'm going to call to order the council meeting for October 29th, 2019. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Hand it over your heart. Okay, so before we get started, we would like to call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor. Quorum is present for the City Council, Successor Agency, Housing Authority, Finance Authority, Parking Authority, and the Joint Powers Authority.
So before we get started, O1 has been pulled. That's a revised salary ordinance. And before we start, we want to present a commendation honoring Still I Rise from Cancer Incorporated. Is there a representative present? Did you? Okay. So it's with great pride and pleasure that the mayor and council members recognize Still I Rise from Cancer Incorporated for its outstanding service. We commend you on your commitment and dedication to make a positive impact in the lives of cancer patients while going through chemotherapy. To provide hope with a smile to survivors who endure such an arduous journey is not only to be commended but acknowledged and honored. Your contribution is worthy of great praise. Now, therefore, be it known that the mayor and council members of the city of Inglewood, California, do hereby salute Still I Rise from Cancer Incorporated, and may you have continued success in all your future endeavors. Presented this 29th day of October 2019. Before we take a picture, is there any words you'd like to say?
Just very, very humbled and honored by this, considering the fact that I graduated from St. Mary's Academy right here in Inglewood. I lived in Carlton Square for several years, so Inglewood is very near and dear to me. So to have this come from the city of Inglewood is definitely an honor. And what my organization does is we help women be able to save their hair during chemo. If any of you have listened to KJLH, Tammy Mack has been discussing it. So it's just, as a 5-year cancer survivor, I feel it's my duty and my mission to give back. And so this is what I'm doing, is being a support group to other women that are going through the same thing. So again, thank you so much for the honor.
Okay, we also have a presentation honoring the 5 Inglewood Library's career online high school graduates. Was Ms. Barnes? Welcome, Sabrina. I like the pink.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and congratulations to my fellow St. Mary's Belle. Hello.
He's high-fiving you.
So we are really pleased to be here today to acknowledge the graduates of our career online program. Sometimes life provides challenges, and your path may not go where you wanted to initially, such as high school graduation. But we are pleased to be able to say that our program that we are offering at a library provides individuals an opportunity to complete their high school education and get a GED. So today I have with me one of our library board members, Pat Douglas, our library manager, Fran Track. However, speaking on behalf of the program today will be the coordinator. Her name is Linda Silva.
Linda, welcome.
Thank you very much. It is my honor to stand here before you today in congratulating our 2019 graduates for their outstanding academic achievement and dedication to successfully completing an 18-month program. We wish you continued success in all your future endeavors. Please come up and accept your certificate. We have here today Jimmy Ruiz, Janice Bennett, Ida Mertiani, and I guess the other two graduates either aren't here yet or we'll present them their
Okay.
certificates later. Thank
Why
you.
why doesn't the staff come over and join us to take a picture with the council?
Oh, the second.
And we're honored to have a presentation from Senator Steve Bradford. I believe I saw the senator earlier.
Said he was going to take a photo op.
And by the way, Senator Bradford fought with us in front of the California Air Resources Board to move the Clippers project along last Thursday morning. So let's give him a big hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm here before you today just to provide you with a brief legislative update. For those of you not familiar, our legislative year runs from January to September. We ended on September 13th, and those following 30 days up until midnight of October 13th, the governor had those 30 days to sign all those outstanding measures that were on his desk. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the year and then highlight the bills that I authored and introduced, I should say, and made it to the governor's desk for his signature. I hope to not belabor you, but we had a great year as a state with much of our legislative accomplishments. One of our major successes overall was addressing the issue of housing and homelessness, which is a major topic here in this city. We passed landmark legislation to prevent unjust evictions and rent gouging, and to streamline the process of using Section 8 vouchers when tenants are looking for homes here in the state of California, and also provided a lot of money to help low-income renters find homes. One of the issues of great concern also is wildfire prevention, as we're witnessing right now, the fires that are going on right in LA City and just north of us in Sonoma, our Wildfire Protection Act to make sure that residents are not unduly charged and ratepayers pay for those fires, which was kind of the way the system was set up. So we're going to make sure that if the utilities are at fault, they bear the costs and not pass those costs on the ratepayers that has been done for years at a time. Also, we prioritize education. We funded education at the highest level of any period in the state of California, especially K through 12 and college and universities. We also secured $50 million for mental health services in schools and placed $15 billion bond on the ballot that will allow for new classrooms, laboratories, and libraries for K through 12 as well as universities. Safe and clean drinking water for all, that's a priority, especially here in Southern California. Many times they think of the water is contaminated more in the rural areas, but as you know, in Sativa, which is part of the 35th Senate District, which I represent, it had to be taken over a little over a year and a half ago by the County of Los Angeles, and we're making major strides of addressing contaminated water throughout the state of California, and it's a major investment. An issue that was of great controversy, use of deadly force by law enforcement, a measure that had been in place here in California since 1872. California reformed that measure to say that now law enforcement must use all due diligence and use every technique available to de-escalate before use of deadly force is being used. It was a monumental piece of legislation, and we were able to come together with all sides, both law enforcement and activists, to achieve that goal. Preventing racial discrimination in the workplace and schools was another issue that the Senate expanded upon, and we're happy to get it passed in the government. Reducing food insecurities for students. We might not know it, but many kids go to school hungry here in the state of California. Even college students go to school hungry. We see now at Cal State Dominguez Hills, Southwest College, and El Camino, they have food pantries, so students can access that. So it's a great issue of concern. So we provided funding for that. And just protecting our senior citizens, planning for the aging community, and making sure we have the resources available for them. And that was just a quick overview of some of the stuff overall in the state. But I introduced 20 measures this year, 13 of which made it to the governor's desk, and of those 13...
Just 1 second. Is that your camera person right there? In the blue in the back?
No.
Sir, we need you to come over here up on the little podium right here for fire exit purposes, so that if there was a need to evacuate, the roads wouldn't be blocked. Thank you much. Go ahead, sir.
I don't have a media team.
You should have said yes.
But as I stated, I introduced 20 measures. 13 made it to the governor's desk, and 10 he signed and passed. And I will quickly go over those 13. SB 155, which clarifies existing requirements to help the state achieve our existing renewable and zero carbon goals, energy goals. We want to always talk about renewable energy. We want to make sure that it's an adequate supply, because we've transformed the utility industry, especially investor-owned utilities, over the last 30 years. They no longer generate, so they purchase on the open market through independent power producers, and we want to make sure that those power producers are providing adequate power when needed. We're seeing what's happening right now with the rolling blackouts and addressing the fires, and we just want to make sure there's an adequate source of power when needed. SB 206, a measure that I was able to talk to this council with a little over 3 weeks ago, the Fair Pay to Play Act. And as was announced this morning, the NC2A has embraced the Fair Pay to Play Act. It's a nationwide game changer as it relates to young men and women who go to college and universities, who play sports, who are now able to monetize their name, likeness, and image. And it's a time long overdue. These athletes have been treated like chattel. NC2A is a billion-dollar industry, and many times, despite the fact that these students were on scholarship, many of them went home or went to bed hungry at night, didn't have adequate clothing, didn't have money for gas in their car. And I think people said the NC2A was going to sue us, as the mayor was mentioning 3 weeks ago when we were talking about it. But its time is coming this morning. If you haven't heard, the NC2A voted unanimously to support what we passed here in California. And as we often say, so goes California, so goes the nation. So we're excited about that. SB 255, which adapts existing energy supplier diversity initiatives. And what we want to make sure is that as we expand this utility space where we bring in more renewables, we want to make sure people of color, women, disabled veteran businesses have an opportunity to contract and procure from these businesses. And it's vitally important that members of the Chamber of Commerce, many of whom have taken advantage of many of the opportunities that now you can, through contracting with Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, the gas company, and on. So we know that industry has changed, and we want to make sure that they capture all the new technology and allow folks to take advantage of that. SB 269, which expands the time that an individual who was wrongfully convicted and proven innocent, wrongly convicted and proven innocent. Up until this measure, you had 2 years from the time that you were released to seek compensation for your incarceration. Compensation that amounted to $140 a day for every day you were incarcerated. Now you have up to 10 years to file for that compensation, because as we all know, being released from prison, you're so caught up with trying to acclimate yourself back to the real world and find housing and all those things. Those 2 years go by like this. So now individuals have 10 years to seek reimbursement for their wrongful conviction. SB 322 allows workers to speak freely and privately with state hospital and health facility inspectors during inspections. Prior to this bill, a nurse or a medical assistant could not speak about a violation in a hospital without somebody from the state being present. It was almost like a whistleblower protection. So now if a violation is seen, a nurse, a medical assistant, any staff can report it. It's vitally important, especially when you have a great facility like Centinela here in your neighborhood, that we make sure that nurses and those employees have the opportunity to report violations if they do exist. SB 455 creates financial empowerment. As we drive throughout L.A. and all across the state, we see what? Check cashing, facilities, payday loans, things of that nature. And I'm not here to knock them, because they exist because many of our traditional banks have walked away from that customer. We have over 3 million unbanked Californians alone. But what we realize, there are some bad actors out there, and the state collects millions of dollars a year in fines from these bad actors, and it just sits in an account, and we weren't doing anything. This piece of legislation now says that that money that's collected by Department of Business Oversight must now provide grants and loans to nonprofits in the community to provide financial literacy and microloans to individuals and businesses. We have millions of dollars that now we can access in the community. So that was SB, I forgot the number, 455. SB 519. I know you're paying attention. I appreciate it. Authorizes the State Water Resources Board to grant money to help also in cleanup of water agencies, especially our replenishment district. We have a lot of contaminated areas around there, so this allows that money to be used directly by these agencies to make quickly and effective cleanup projects. Prior to this, it would take years at a time to just be able to allocate those resources. Now those resources can go directly to those agencies. SB 534 reinstates their insurance supplier diversity survey and diversity board. Again, it encourages businesses, insurance agencies that do $100 million of work here in the business in the state of California to, again, contract with women-owned, minority-owned, and disabled owned businesses here in the state of California. So it creates a tremendous opportunity for small business growth and sustainability. SB 595 requires the state, if you saw 60 Minutes on Sunday, one of the biggest pieces was cannabis. And whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. It was passed by over 50% of the voters in 2016, Proposition 64. It promised billions of dollars to the state of California. And as you saw, very few people in this space look like folks in this room. So this measure provides fee waivers and license assistance for those who choose to enter this space. And many times, as you saw in 60 Minutes, the majority of the concentration has been focused on growing. We have more than enough growers, and it also focused on some of the illegal shops that exist all throughout the state of California. What I'm trying to get folks to understand throughout the state of California, that there are 17 licenses outside of growing and distribution that's available for folks. For the municipal side, has been discussed. A report just came out today. Israel has done extensive research on medicinal use of cannabis. You have to manufacture that product somewhere. For the edible products, you have to produce it. So we want to encourage folks to open up commercial kitchens, open up testing laboratories, because that's what is needed, and we don't have enough of it. As you saw them going to a testing laboratory, we do not have enough testing laboratories. Everything that is sold, whether it's for medicinal use or adult use, has to be tested. So I'm encouraging folks who are looking to get in this space, and many people have approached me over the last 4 years, how do we get into this space? I say quit looking at being a grower and a dispensary, and look at those other spaces from marketing, packaging, again, commercial kitchens. So this makes the pathway to that industry a little bit easier. SB 676 lowers the overall costs associated with California's growing number of electric vehicles. As I was with the mayor and council a little over a month ago, there's 4 new charging stations right outside City Hall. We want to make sure that as we expand these charging stations, that we also have the capacity to serve these cars and residents and business. So make sure there's adequate power supply. It's not enough to put the charging station in there, but we have to understand what that impact means to the grid. So this bill helps address that. Those were the 10 measures real quick. And I just want to also mention that I was able to secure $30 million again with the expansion of people of color and women and our disabled veterans to facilitate their entry into the cannabis market space. We also secured $7.5 million for Charles Drew University, which is right down the road from here, that produces more doctors and nurses of color than any medical school in the nation. So that will help them recruit from communities such as this as well. And also $5 million ongoing funding for community-based organizations to establish and sustain the improved and transformative, I should say, rehabilitation programs for our folks who are released, to help them secure education and certification in mental health services, be a mental health service provider. As you can see, that was a lot of information and a very compressed time, I should say. It was a full year of a lot of activity. It's a first year of a 2-year session, so I look forward to continuing to work with the city and the other 6 cities of the 35th Senate District. There are 7 independent cities, as well as portions of LA that make up the 35th Senate District, which is comprised of $1 million. So I appreciate this time and opportunity, and I want to commend the council for recognizing Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I wear my pin proudly. As I was pin walking in the door, my mother's a 29-year survivor of breast cancer, so thank you for that recognition. If there's any questions, I would entertain them at this time.
Excuse me?
I said if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain them at this time.
Oh, no, we wouldn't allow any questions.
Oh, I'm just saying from you, the council.
No, let me tell you something. You thought that was brief. That was more time than Alex and Wanda put together.
I understand. I understand.
That was good, and it was informative, and it was comprehensive, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Blame me for working too hard.
Thank you.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. Public comment. Any persons wishing to make a comment on any item on today's agenda may do so at that time, with the reminder that 01, the salary ordinance has been pulled. Please, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Thank you for your time. I'm going to speak a little bit quick. I have quite a bit to say. I just wanted to commend you once again on some of the moratorium that was put into place. I once again thought you guys did a great job on the research, and I was very, good compromise. I'm a little bit shocked today that we're talking about instituting the Rent Control Board because 6 months ago that was something that wasn't on the table. And I very much appreciated your research on that and your decision on that to, I thought understood at that point that that's something that we want to avoid. Right now, I get the sense that we're potentially looking at moving towards a City of Los Angeles style rent control method. One of the shining lights for us in Inglewood is that we're not City of LA. A lot of what City of LA has done has failed. Wasn't but a few months ago, feds were over in LADWP. There's all kinds of problems going on with them, and we really want to avoid that. I have concern as a citizen here of Inglewood, also as a property owner, also as a broker. I have a very good management experience in dealing with City of LA. I'm concerned about some of the labor fees that would be taken on by the city to open this rent control board and to staff it. I feel that those are funds that should be sent directly to help tenants that are in need. The reality is we are here in every city statewide. We just got statewide rent control signed last week by the governor. Many tenants can't afford any rent increase, okay, but that's not feasible for anybody. Tenants need help. The landlords are not here to dispute that. Funds of that nature, if you have 10 FTEs with the taxes and costs and everything else, that's easily can be $1 million to fund 10 FTEs and a rent control board. That's money that needs to go to tenant programs.
Ma'am, I don't want to take any time from you. The rent control board is a non-paid position. There may be a city staff person that is taken on, but the rent control board will be volunteer.
I would be concerned that it's a slippery slope, Mr. Mayor.
I'm very concerned with slippery slopes.
Yeah, I'm very concerned with slippery slopes, as we are also with the state rent control and changes that they're likely going to make in a couple of more years when they realize that it's not getting what they want. If we're talking about registration fees on the units, I'm very concerned about what City of LA does right now. They allow some pass-throughs and recapture. Fair to the landlord, still extra stress to a tenant. If we can avoid these things being created by this rent control board, that would be great. We, as you've probably stated, since it's unpaid, we already have great infrastructure in place. We have an excellent CBO. We have a building and safety department that's really great. We have a housing department that's ran really well. They need more money and more resources to help these tenants. I just wanted to say that. Oh, wow, that went fast. Once again, it's probably a little ironic. Next week, I think, we have a hearing on the water increase. Fees are always going up for the landlord, so we really want to ask you to keep that in mind and really try to stick with the moratorium guidelines that we, I think was a good compromise. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You guys, we're not going to do the applaud thing, but I appreciated it. Go ahead.
Honorable Mayor, council members, my name is Fred Sutton. I'm here on behalf of the California Apartment Association. As Senator Bradford pointed out earlier, the state implemented or is going to implement 1482, a statewide price gouging and for-cause eviction regulation statewide. Although not perfect, it protects financial flexibility of the owner and mitigates many of the concerns we had and relates to just cause evictions. It has a rent rollback period to March 15th, and CAA statewide has been working on compliance and educating owners throughout the state. The HPI, which is before you today, has had several iterations since it was first come up with. Actually, the earlier version seemed slightly similar to AB 1482. It has become increasingly more stringent as it's gone along. There has not been community feedback as it relates to it, nor has there been a financial analysis done. I know that this is supposed to be a volunteer board, but there is going to be a financial impact, whether it's a decrease in property values, which will affect taxes coming to the city. And we do think that that, along with a study of 1482, should be done prior to making a decision. I think that is a fair request. We can avoid a bifurcated system. If 1482 is adopted, We can possibly save the city tens of thousands, possibly millions of dollars if you're comparing it to cities of like size and smaller. And we can ensure compliance throughout the entire area and stop this slippery slope of an ever-expanding bureaucracy. In the city of Los Angeles, they are still talking about the rent stabilization weekly. 90% of the buildings in Los Angeles are covered by the RSO. There are still calls that 3% is too much, and there are constantly tweaks going on. These kinds of conversations do not end. We encourage the city to maintain the moratorium. You were out in front of what the state was doing earlier this year. Maintain the moratorium till January 1st when AB 1482 takes effect. Thank you.
Not touch, but I'm short.
Oh,
so-
you absolutely can touch it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read this from my phone. Hello, my name is Phoebe Crenshaw, and I'm here on behalf of Inglewood residents who were affected by high rent increases prior to March 5th and still have not received remedy during this housing crisis. Since January, I've been in direct communication with the council, specifically you, Mayor, Councilman Morales, and Jaime Gonzalez, and the city attorney about how rental provisions or the lack thereof have affected my apartment community. First, I want to thank the council for the efforts that have been made to establish a rent stabilization ordinance. I'm here to propose that Section 8-127, Portion B of the city's most recent iteration of the ordinance, sent to me yesterday by the city attorney, be instituted and the last sentence of Section A be removed entirely because it contradicts Section B and removes any provision for people affected by increases prior to March 5th. It fails to right the wrong of the initial exorbitant increases that greatly affected this community, making this particular iteration counterproductive. I'm also proposing that the city institute, very similarly to Section 8-121 of the June's iteration of the ordinance, monetary remedy in the form of reimbursement or credited rent at the discretion of the tenants to be paid to tenants by landlords for overpayment of rent that has incurred over the several months that have passed while the city has struggled to compose an ethical solution to this crisis. Lastly, I'm proposing that at the very least, in addition to a 3 to 5% increase limit on rents, that residents who have received increases over 25% receive reimbursement for overpayment, and this be applicable to increases that occurred on or after January 1st, 2019. I believe that that is an ethical solution and remedies the city's failure to regulate its landlords' housing practices prior to instituting the emergency ordinance. My rent was increased 56% 4 days prior to the emergency ordinance. 56% is not only exorbitant, 56% is well over the 25% deemed unreasonable by the city. While waiting for city provisions, nearly every resident in my building was forced to move, including families with children. I, however, still have faith that the city will do what is right in a timely manner to ensure that the well-being and stability of its renters remain, who make up more than 60% of Inglewood's population. And rent is due in 2 days, so thank you.
Could I ask you something?
Yes.
You said everyone in your building's moved but you?
There's only 2 other residents other than me that have remained in my entire complex.
You know, we're really not, I'm not in favor of rolling back rents and giving rebates. So if these other tenants are gone, then it would only benefit 3 apartment owners. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not the only person. I highly doubt that I'm the only resident in Inglewood
3 tenants. No,
who has still
ma'am.
who has still held on to their property, hoping that you
Ma'am,
guys
I'm
will
just
rectify
asking,
that.
I'm just asking you a direct question.
And
For
I
you-
answered it,
for,
sir.
For your building, it would benefit 3 tenants. Is that right?
In my specific instance, yes.
All right, thank you.
But I don't believe I'm the only tenant in Inglewood who is still holding on to their
I
rental
Ma'am, I
property,
totally-
hoping that you all will make that
I
retroactive.
totally understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, City Council and Mayor of Inglewood. I'm highly encouraged. I just met Snoop Dogg downstairs.
My.
That was so cool. I know. So my name's Yvonne. I'm an organizer with LA Voice, and I'm here representing leaders from 4 congregations: the St. John Christendom, Holy Faith Episcopal Church, Inglewood First United Methodist Church, and First Presbyterian Church of Inglewood. And we are highly encouraged by this, rent control ordinance. Going from 5% to 3% is highly encouraging because some of the church members have experienced rent increases. Some of the clergy have been doing their rounds around the neighborhood, talking to folks as well. And so we're highly encouraged. The only thing that I wanted to lift up in this current proposed policy is the relocation for disabled adults and seniors. Somehow the language doesn't include disabled children, which I think the intention was to somehow benefit the relocation, somehow the relocation assistance benefit for disabled children. And so, I would just wanted to lift up that small technicality and see, and make sure that the disabled children can also benefit from the relocation assistance. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Oh no, that's it. So highly encouraged, and yeah, if you could take a look at that, that would benefit the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Yeager. I'm a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. The Legal Aid Foundation represents the poorest and most vulnerable residents of LA County, including many right here in Inglewood, many right across the street at the Inglewood Courthouse. I'm here to thank the mayor and the city council for bringing this motion back up. We are very encouraged and thankful that you're passing these much needed protections that we have seen a need for over the past decade or so. I wanted to point out, though, some unintended consequences of the way the ordinance is drafted, and that may have some consequences, particularly for our client population. The first is the enforcement section. Without explicit language stating this, it may be hard for tenants to assert this ordinance as a defense during their eviction proceedings. Some judges take a very narrow reading of the law, and without explicit language allowing for it, it will not let a tenant raise this ordinance as a defense. We know without language that explicitly allows a tenant to assert, the protections in this ordinance as a defense to an action to recover possession. Some of the language appears in the, section 8.132 about retaliation, but does not appear in the section 8-133 enforcement procedures. So if that language was added, it would ensure that, judges, in addition, comply with this law. The second thing that I wanted to bring to the council's attention is the exemptions. The rent cap portion of this ordinance exempts units in 2 to 4 unit buildings. A lot of our clients happen to live in these smaller buildings. They naturally have lower rents, oftentimes. The memo that's attached to the ordinance suggests that this exemption only applies if the owner is not a natural person, if it's a real estate investment trust or has some kind of corporate ownership. There's a reference to that in the memo, but I could not find that language in the ordinance itself. So it's unclear if it's supposed to, if the exemption for 2 to 4 units is only supposed to exempt buildings that are owned by natural persons, or all 2 to 4 unit buildings.
You talked about section 8-133. You said that
yes,
it's not written to allow enforcement by the courts. Is that what you said?
So it's not written to explicitly allow a tenant to raise this ordinance as a defense in an action to recover possession. So it does say that a tenant can pursue civil action to bring enforcement of this ordinance. What I wanted to share with the council is that some judges would view that as a tenant can only bring an affirmative lawsuit against their landlord, but if they're brought into eviction court, they can't defend themselves by saying, my landlord illegally raised my rent.
And so you're saying that this should be written as an affirmative defense against eviction. However, the ordinance does specify the only areas where evictions are allowed.
Yes, we've seen this before in certain other jurisdictions where it was clearly the intent of the ordinance was to provide these protections to tenants, but it was missing this explicit language, and judges refused to allow the tenants to raise these as defenses.
Mr. City Attorney, you have an opinion on that? Well, the decision has to be made today because this will be the first reading of the new ordinance, and any amendments we make have to occur today because in 30 days it has to be the second reading, and we cannot wait until the moratorium expires. But
Mayor,
yes, sir.
Really quick, basically his opinion is for us to consider the fact that some judges will have a different interpretation to this, and I have not seen any evidence of that as well.
And neither have I.
So, I mean, if you brought some where that shows, then we could maybe take a look at it. But other than that, I mean, it's basically you're giving us an opinion on what you think should be interpreted, and our city attorney had not found it.
And we can't write ordinance based on what some judges do.
Exactly.
Judges do sometimes, forgive me, goofy things. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Exactly.
And Mayor, as the other speakers mentioned, that we can amend the ordinance later on.
In the future. Jorge Rivera, who was nice enough to put in a speaker's card.
Is he present in the room?
Okay, Jorge, you'll be next. Ma'am,
Third.
ma'am, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Catherine Burdette, and I'm a realtor. I'm also a board member on the Inglewood Board of Realtors and a state director. And this coming year, I'll be the issues chair for fair housing and equal opportunity for investment housing for California Association of Realtors. So housing and affordability are very important to me as a business person, a realtor, and as a member of this community. And the main thing that I find that we have is a shortage of affordable housing, which is the critical issue why rents are going up so drastically in our area. There is a AB 1482, as you know, is coming into effect in January. And it was a very comprehensive rent control measure that was looked at by many people and was signed off by the governor of California. And also it was a way to make it fair and open to allow developers to want to buy and sell property in our area, and also to encourage them to increase affordable housing. And by making home ownership, investment housing unaffordable, or make it so that it's so much restriction that's more restrictive than the AB 1482 that's becoming effective as of January, I think it'll cause more investors and landlords to want to sell their properties here in the city of Inglewood to higher cost investors, which will cause the new rents to be even higher. And the more restrictions that you put on people who want to invest in the city of Inglewood in housing, the more likely the shortage will increase. So I'd like for you to consider 1482 and all the tenants that it completely has in it that would be fair to both homeowners, property owners, as well as tenants. I feel that we need more housing in Inglewood, not less. We don't want to have restrictions that will cause people not to want to do business in our city, and for us not to have more affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Wallace, and I'm with the Inglewood Tenants Union, and I'm just really grateful of the progress that we've made to get to this point to be discussing 3%, because landlords and property owners had been gouging people so ridiculously that people were facing homelessness, and it is frustrating to me to hear people talk about the kind of profits that they're making, which I understand is a business, but people are facing homelessness as a result of it, and that really needs to be explicitly stated. That's what the tenants here are facing. And so I do think 3% is an improvement. I think that that's something that's better. We've suggested that it be 2% because people are already dealing with the raised rents that they've already gotten. So, for example, in my case, the landlord raised the rent just a little less than 5%. And so the 3% in a year, yeah, that's going to be something that is less than before. But at the same time, we're still having to work with the same amount with less money because we're having to spend out for rent. I also wanted to talk about the rental board. I still believe, and we still believe, that it needs to be elected, an elected rental board, which you disagreed upon. But I feel like it needs to reflect the actual makeup of Inglewood, which is 63% tenants. And maybe things may change, but it really needs to reflect the makeup of the city that we're living in. So I think that they have the best idea of what tenants would need. In addition to that, affordable housing is something that we discuss a lot, but in the definition of affordable housing actually includes people who make up to $60,000 a year, and Inglewood residents make about $40,000 a year. So of course landlords are going to be looking at people who are making more money because they believe that they can charge more rent to them. So even the concept of affordable housing to me is a bit of a misnomer. It needs to be low income housing that reflects the minimum wage and the wage of the workers of Inglewood. So I also want to echo the enforcement aspect of this as well. That is something that has concerned me, and has concerned me throughout the moratoriums of it. Is yes, there is this law that exists that has been put on the books, but if there's no agency for people to go to be able to resolve these kinds of conflicts, one person talked about bureaucracy. People are going to be going to the county, to the state. It increases even more so. So there really needs to be an explicit enforcement of who is going to be making sure, since there's a sunset of 5 years for repairs that are going to be made according to the ordinance, that after these 5 years end, that the landlord is going to be charging what they should be charging, which is less that amount. So that's what I think about this ordinance. I feel like we're on a positive path, and I'm really grateful to the residents of Inglewood and the people who supported us, who have gotten us this far. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. My name is Jorge Rivera. I'm the Southern California Regional Coordinator with Tenants Together. We're California's statewide organization for renters' rights. We want to applaud you for bringing this forward and for dedicating yourselves to the Inglewood renters. Also want to thank you, Mayor Butts, for coming out and supporting LA folks alongside of some of your other colleagues from Culver City, who they themselves elected to put rent control or rent freeze in place. We want to stand by the Inglewood renters here and say that we do appreciate the lowering of the rent cap to 3%. I don't know how many of the working people here get an income increase of 3% annually, but we understand that that's sort of like the average going around the state, so we do appreciate the 3% rent cap. We want to encourage you in favor of what the attorney from LAFLA was saying. And I want to invite the city attorney to consider putting in this affirmative language. I don't know if the council member Morales or anybody else has sat inside an eviction court and listened to the interpretation of the law by these judges. I have many a time, and I will tell you that the interpretation of the law is sometimes left in the hands of the commissioners and the judges. And if the affirmative language does not hurt the initiative in any way, I don't see why there would be any harm in putting in there an additional protective measure for the renters as they're defending themselves in court. And it's a highly stressful situation, so any additional defense would be very much welcomed. We also would like to encourage you all to have representatives of the community on the rental board. I don't know if we have an opinion whether elected or appointed, but they should definitely be some renters on that board to reflect the makeup of the community. And we just want to, again, I just wanted to dispel a couple of things that were said earlier. And there's numerous studies that have been done on places that have rent control and rental stabilization ordinances do not lower property values. In many cases, they actually stay the same or they increase. And as far as the need for more affordable housing, Yes, we do need more affordable housing and housing that is affordable to the community members, but we're not going to build our way out of this crisis or this disaster, if you will. And so we again want to just convey our gratitude and our applause to the City Council and the Mayor for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Jorge, I want to read something to you. 8-131, Civil Remedies. A tenant may bring a civil suit in the courts of the state alleging that his/her landlord has violated any of the provisions of Chapter 8, Article 9, or 10 of the Municipal Code, or any regulation promulgated thereunder. A landlord found to have violated either article in a civil suit shall be liable to the tenant for all actual and punitive damages, and the prevailing tenant shall be entitled to reasonable attorney's fees and costs as determined by the court. Additionally, upon a showing that the landlord has acted willfully or with oppression, fraud, or malice, the tenant shall be awarded treble damages. No administrative remedy need be exhausted prior to filing a civil suit pursuant to this section. The next is Section 8-133. The city at its sole discretion may choose to enforce the provisions of Chapter 8, Articles 9 and 10 through its administrative citations procedure set forth in Chapter 11, Article 11.4 of the Municipal Code, and or pursue any other civil or criminal enforcement action. The city's decision to pursue or not pursue enforcement of any kind shall not affect a tenant's right to pursue civil remedies under this article or any other applicable law. So we do feel it is covered.
A civil suit is different than an eviction case? An
Actually,
unlawful
we
detainment
talked
case?
about our right to take criminal action as well. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very clear. Hi.
Hi. I'm Julia Jordan, and I'm just an Inglewood rental property owner that's here on behalf of small mom and pop rental properties. We were just here a few months ago talking about the 5% rent cap, and so like many of the other speakers have said before, we thought that it was a comparable compromise for both the tenant and the landlord. We all pay prices in different ways. I know I've heard a lot of speakers here, and I've read a lot of articles, and we hear a lot of media about rent gouging, and I hear it a lot here today. Well, I'm here to tell you I don't rent gouge. Other property owners that I spoke with or meet with or do business with, regardless, that has never been a topic. So those of us who are trying to do right by tenants, meaning that our rents were below market, which I think is one of the things that was attractive to Inglewood, why so many tenants were attracted to the city of Inglewood, was because the rent was lower than other surrounding areas. And as a result of that, now we're kind of being forced into a situation where we may not be able to meet our budget. We might not be able to pay our bills, because you're right, we are facing possible water increases, which are extremely high. We've added on recyclable bin costs to the mandated recyclable program. Our insurances have increased just because we live in California. So there are a number of things that we have already taken on our backs, and we've done that. We certainly recognize and respect tenants, and we want all people to have reasonable housing. However, we all have to carry our own weight on our backs, and I think to reduce the cap control down to 3%, it would break our back. We would be looking at homeless just like the tenants are looking at homeless.
Ma'am, what was
because
your
we
name?
couldn't sustain that.
Okay, what was your name again?
Julia.
Julia, I thought that's what she said. Julia, you know, one of the things, on the average, how much do you raise rent every year?
Up until this year, we didn't raise it every year.
Okay.
It was on the average of every other year. We would base that on certainly cost. We would look at the cost over a 2-year period. We would certainly base it on what upgrades we needed and wanted to put in the units, and that's another thing. We want to keep our properties well maintained.
Right.
And unfortunately, it costs money. But there's no gouging. Unfortunately,
I'm not
think a
saying that
few
at all.
people-
So on the average, every 5 years, how much would you say you raised rent? On the average, in a 5-year period?
Probably 4, 5.
Percent in
maybe
total?
6 every Up until recently,
Okay.
every other year,
And-
because we had the ability,
Right.
and that was one thing we factored in. We had the ability to raise it when we did get a new tenant and/or if some
Okay. So
something changed.
So I'm doing this for a purpose, and I'm using your time, but I'll give it back to you. See,
Okay.
here's the point. When we had the first hearing, we had a couple hearings, first about the moratorium and then about the first housing protection ordinance. And one thing I heard universal from every landlord that came up here, they said they don't raise the rent every year and they never do more than 3%. That's what I heard universally. And the reason that I made a recommendation to the council, that this is just a recommendation, to go to 3%, because what we're trying to do here in the city, we are in the midst of an economic renaissance that we want our residents to participate in. In all of our development agreements, we have a 35% local hire goal so that we hire residents. At 5% a year, and what happens is when you institute some type of control, then what happens, even good people like yourself say, well, I need to do 5% every year. And what would happen is, in 5 years, the rent would have increased 25%. We expect these jobs to come online fully in the next 5 to 6 years. And what would that mean? That would mean that the people that have been here through the worst of times would have had to leave the city. And so that's where this 3% cap came in, because we felt that people could make it through and get these better jobs. Now, over the last 8 years, the unemployment rate in the city has dropped from 17.5% to 4.7%. We have the lowest unemployment rate of a minority-majority city, probably in the state of California. We're proud of that, but we want to do much better. So this 3% cap actually was based on the actual testimony of universally, every landlord came up here, I'd ask them, how much do you raise the rent? And so it isn't that we said, well, we're going to cut you in half. We just said, well, let's go to something that they said is fair, and at the same time would allow people to be here when these jobs come online. So people that moved in here 2-3 years ago aren't the ones reaping the benefits of this harvest that is Inglewood. So I want you to understand that. But I'm going to tell you, I hear you, and as we deliberate this, you know, there probably will be adjustments probably here, because this is the time it has to happen. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome. And I just want to say, too, that, maybe landlords limited their increase at times to 3%, but that was before we lost the ability to raise it whenever it was necessary.
I understood that, but the reality is everyone has an economic pro forma, and if you had to raise it more than 3% to stop from losing money every month, you would do that, and I recognize that. The reality is that Inglewood wasn't as desirable a place to live as it is now, and so the rents were based upon demand, and there's a greater demand now. And that's just the way the economy works, and you know that. So I want to tell you that I've heard you. Everybody here has heard you. I want you to understand that.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jelani Hendricks with the Uplift Inglewood Coalition. First and foremost, I just want to say I'm glad that we have a permanent ordinance here in the city of Inglewood. It's definitely going to keep a lot of long-term residents in the city, and I'm grateful for that. I do personally feel that it should be a hard cap at 3%. I know there are some exceptions that are currently in the ordinance as drafted now, but I think it should be at a hard cap at 3%.
When you say a hard cap, are you talking about the CPI?
No, I'm not referring to the CPI.
You're referring the catch-up of 80% below market, less than 80% of market.
Correct.
Okay.
Also, just like someone else said earlier, I think the rental board should be an elected rental board. We have examples of this. For instance, in Berkeley, they have an elected rental board. And then also on the ordinance, I noticed that for folks that you all potentially are going to choose for this rental board, it said citizen and not resident. And I think it should say resident, because everyone in the city of Inglewood may not be a citizen, and they should be able to potentially be on this this board. Capital improvements, I looked at that area as well. I think that's good if it's like a roof or a water heater, something that's major, something that you actually need to be in a suitable dwelling, but not things like carpet, drapes, things of that nature. So I think that we should really figure out what requirements or what exactly a capital improvement is for landlords. And then also with the temporary ordinance that's currently in play, people are still receiving rent increases over 5%. Hopefully with this new ordinance, with the permanent ordinance, we can find some type of mechanism to make sure landlords are obeying the law. Because right now I still get emails, I still get phone calls from folks that have experienced 10, 12, 15% rent increases.
Well, Jelani, what did you do when you received those notices? What did you do with that information?
I referred them to a lawyer.
And instead, you could have called the council person who was in charge of that district, and the city attorney's office would have called the landlord. And we have had instances like that. And excuse me, Jelani, and in every instance, they rescinded the increase. All I'm saying is that when you come here at the 11th hour and say things like that, it's hard for us to give it credence because the city has a moratorium in effect, and we have the capacity to contact people. Now, we will have a much more vigorous enforcement arm because we will probably have to hire staff to oversee this program. But all I want to say is that when you get told that, it's hard for us to give it credence when you come here. Now we're about to pass a permanent ordinance and say, I know people that have 12, 15%. Just please don't do that. Please refer them to the city.
Yeah, and I have told them that they need to go to the city. I told them that personally, and I also emailed them a digital copy of the ordinance.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying, and I've done that. And then also, I do think we need to consider doing something for folks that have been rent gouged prior to March 5th. So folks that have received huge increases, 20 to 25% and up. I have talked to lawyers, and it is doable. Because for some of those folks that have been rent gouged already, the 3% might evict them or put them in homelessness. So I think that's something we really need to consider. Those are some of the most vulnerable residents in the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jelani.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Whiteway. I'm a real estate broker in the city of Inglewood. Have always been a big fan of the city of Inglewood. Not so much recently, I have to admit. Yeah, I think it's really unfair. I know it says in like the first page of this new draft that this is to be fair to both renters and owners alike. I don't see anything fair in here to the owners of the property. It is decreasing the property values. I have an elderly couple with a triplex in the city of Inglewood. They've owned for almost 50 years. They almost never raise the rents. It's time for them to sell, to move where their children have moved out of state. And we served a very reasonable rent increase on the other two tenants because we were having a problem getting them a fair offer on their property because the rents were so low. We served them a rent increase that took them only to, one of them slightly less than 80% and one slightly more than 80% of what you have listed here. Our buyer on the last iteration of this ordinance, you guys did not protect the 2 to 4 category. They looked it up on the website, found that it was not protected, and they canceled the transaction.
Well, good to know it's protected now.
Doesn't help us.
Oh,
Are our rent increases?
believe me,
Okay,
like
let me ask
cars,
you.
there'll be another buyer.
What's that?
Believe me, there'll be another buyer.
Not at the rents that these people have not raised rents in many, many years on these people. So let me ask you this. The rent increases that we served in July, because we were going on what you guys told us, that this was a protected category. Are those rent increases still valid?
Okay.
Tenants are telling us no.
Hold on one second. It was 5% at that time. When this ordinance goes into
On
effect.
a triplex?
On a triplex, when it goes into effect, buildings of 4 units or less are exempt.
But the first two drafts that you put out said that they were protected. And we went based on what
That
you
was-
told us.
That was the moratorium, and that's true during the moratorium. If this is voted into law, they will be exempt. Is that fair?
So,
Is the one where we heard it, it was introduced and never came back for passing,
Right.
which also exempted the 2 to 4 units.
Right.
And that is correct. And so that's why it fell into the category that it didn't exempt those units. Now, after today, they will be exempt.
If it passes.
If it passes, it will be exempt. As written into, what's the section, right offhand, I think it's the definition section where.
It's the exemption section.
it's
But anyway,
both.
buildings of 4 units or less will be exempt from this control.
Assuming it passes.
but the rent increases that we gave these tenants in July, based on what you had told us before and what we saw in print on the
Okay.
first two,
Was
are
fi-
not.
Did
are
you
not.
make it 5%?
Those are not. No, they were not. It was not 5% at that. I'm so sorry. I went on the first two iterations that I read.
Okay.
And
So
did-
here's the only thing that's been in effect. The only thing that was in effect all this time was the moratorium, which was 5%. That's the only thing that's been in effect. Because what happened was there was a first reading, there was no second reading. And so there's been a change. So this is the first reading of this iteration. And if this is voted in, then in 30 days, there'll be an affirmation vote, and then this will become the law. And units of 4 units or less will be exempt. So is that fair?
But no, it's not fair.
Okay.
But so the rent increase that we gave in July is not valid.
What was the
What was the increase?
As I said, it brought it to about just right around the 80%.
What was the percentage increase?
One of them was rented at 1,100, and it was it was 900, and it was raised to 1,225, I believe.
Might have gotten over. So
That's
I mean,
you could have only raised it $90. So no, that was not.
So even though in the first two, the
No.
first one that you talked
The
about,
only
it
thing
was
that's in
protected.
effect is the 5% moratorium.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Still waiting for her to say it's fair. Go ahead.
Hello, my name's Kerr. I'm part of Inglewood Tenants Union, and I'm just here to basically echo a lot of things I feel like were kind of dismissed. The one thing is echoing the one person that said in my building as well. I've seen people come in and out just in this last year alone when the moratorium was there. So the reality aside, what's happening inside California as a whole is the realization that people are struggling to pay their rent, right? That's why the state happened. That's why the state law was enacted, and that's why a lot of rent controls in doing that. That's why a lot of tenant unions are building up power because of these things. This is not because we're lazy. This is not because we can't afford a job. We don't have a job. This is because right now we're feeling like we've been, but on current levels, especially inside Inglewood, immensely been under attack. So I don't want to dismiss that inside that. I also want to talk about the language that they told you about inside there, talking about using inside eviction courts. I don't think any of you all probably experienced eviction courts, and I feel like we should go by what people actually have experienced and have spent their life doing, right, and saying this to you. And I'm assuming that you all haven't spent your life in eviction court helping and doing casework with actual tenants. So I would say that and listen to the people that actually have done this and saying that this is not useful for them, right? And it might not be useful for me because I actually I do casework as well, and I've heard stories of similar things as well. So I just want to keep that in mind. I also want to echo the thing about elected boards. Appointed boards to me is just ridiculous. I don't understand the point of having an appointed board. I think we put a lot of trust. That's a lot of trust in y'all that I personally do not have. And I think a lot of other residents don't. Because right now we're at a state right now where it hasn't been, this is defensive, right? We're not being offensive with this whole rent control. A lot of people already have been kicked out of Inglewood and on immense levels, and also are currently still going to be kicked out because of this as well, because of the rent increases that happened before January 1st, and they're still trying to build and pay up for that. So I think that we have to understand right now it's not a state of thing where we're doing preventative care. We're actually trying to amend all the Band-Aids that are actually currently happening right now, and hoping that most people won't go through the leaks and won't bleed out. But the reality is that a lot of people are still going to do that, and and so we got to figure out the balance between that. So I just want to echo what people were saying and talk, and that's basically what I want to say. Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Willie A.G., and I live in the beautiful city of Inglewood for 53 years. And I'm speaking to the #1 council in the United States who have built the #1 city in the United States of America, right here. The way they did that was they passed approximately 12 or 13 hard bills that everybody didn't like. That's why the city is #1 in the country. Now, I moved here 54 years ago. I've been paying taxes ever since I moved here. The city haven't done a thing to me, but just allowed me to do my thing. I want to speak for the person that went out and broke their behind and bought income property and rented to people in the city. Now, I'd like to know how much taxes do the rentals pay? How much taxes do the property owner pay? Now, I've been paying taxes ever for 54 years, you know, and I can't call somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, my water heater's out, you need to come over here and fix it. Now, who's going to pay for that? The landlord's got to pay for it. You know, I had quite a bit of property here. I got rid of it because I got tired of the renters taking advantage of me. You know, I don't think anybody's guaranteed a place to stay in Inglewood. You know, #1 city in the United States, everybody in the country want to come here because of what you guys did. Passed the law, strong laws that you guys been passing that made this city #1 in the United States. Don't let outside people come here that move from one place to another just because, you know, sometimes we have to do for ourselves. The more you do for a person, the more they're going to expect from you. I got confidence in this council up here. All I'm going to do is tell you guys, it's a hard vote. Vote for the people that pay taxes, that's got this city where it is. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will close public comment. Item 1, CSA 1 and H1.
Warrant registers.
Move allow payment.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Council members, successor agency members, and housing authority members. Padilla.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Chairman Butts.
Aye. Madam Clerk, what's the next scheduled matter?
Yes, Mayor. The next scheduled matter is a public hearing to consider an ordinance approving zoning code amendment 2019-001 to Chapter 12 of the Inglewood Municipal Code to allow towing services with ancillary vehicle storage and ancillary vehicle inspection in the CS zone citywide.
Has the notice of this hearing been given in a time, form, and manner as required by law, and do you have the affidavit on file?
Notice has been given and an affidavit is on file.
Have you received any communications on the matter?
No communications have been received.
Mr. City Manager, your staff report.
Yes, Ms. Wendy Wilcox, Planning Manager, will give the staff report.
Welcome, Ms. Wilcox.
Mayor and council members, the code amendment before you today is an applicant-initiated code amendment request to allow vehicle towing and ancillary vehicle storage and inspection in the CS or commercial service zone. Currently, new towing service and ancillary uses are not allowed in the CS zone. The CS zone is located on La Brea Avenue from the city's southern boundary at 104th Street up to Spruce, so up to the southern edge of downtown Inglewood. Towing service is, as I mentioned, not currently a permitted use in any zone in the city, but it has been historically interpreted to be allowed in the M1 industrial zone of the city under the category of vehicle storage. The staff analyzed this request and determined that the proposed use is compatible with other uses allowed in the CS zone, including auto sales, auto rental, car washes, auto repair, and other car-oriented uses. Staff also determined that there's likely to be a growing need for towing capacity in Inglewood, given the visitor-serving developments proposed and underway in the city. So based on this, staff recommended to the Planning Commission to allow towing service and ancillary activities in the CS zone, subject to requiring a special use permit and development standards, which include a 1,000-foot separation from other existing towing businesses, a minimum site size of 30,000 square feet, and a lot frontage requirement of 100 feet. In addition, a tow service office would need to be maintained on site. Parking lot improvements would need to be made to the site as well. Any ancillary vehicle storage or vehicle inspection that is proposed would need to be screened appropriately. And it would be prohibited to store trucks, buses, and trailers. So based on staff's analysis, the Planning Commission recommended to the City Council approval of this code amendment on September 4th, 2019. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wilcox. Are there any persons present who wish to address City Council on this matter? All right, so public comment portion is now closed. Is there a motion or any questions of the council?
1, 2, 3. Which is, yeah.
That's to affirm the categorical exemption and a motion to waive further reading. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor. Council members Padilla.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Buds.
Aye. Who would like to introduce?
I introduce.
Councilman Franklin introduces. Consent calendar items 2 through 9.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Council members Padilla.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Buds.
Aye. 01 has been pulled. A1,
Thank you, Mayor. There's no oral report.
CM1,
Yes, Mayor and City Council. Planning for the 2020 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration is underway. The event will be held on Saturday, January 18th, 2020, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and include a commemorative program, parade, and family festival. New this year, the event will also include a Queen in Court. The competition is open to junior and senior high school girls who live in or attend high school in Inglewood. Cash prizes will also be awarded. Applications are now available online only and will be accepted through November 18, 2019.
thank you, Mr. City Manager. CT1, Madam City Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like to report that this morning I did purchase a $250,000 CD at 1.75 interest rate from Raymond James. It's an excellent buy because rates are declining, and I've had nearly 20 million investment vehicles that have been called due to declining interest rates. Also, I would like to mention that the City Treasurer Student Academy program, again, starts on November the 6th. Applications are available in the library, also in my office, also online, and also at the City Clerk's office. Again, this is a 4-week program. Start on November the 6th, and it ends on November the 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving. And also, I would like to just to make a comment regarding the breast cancer award that was done a little bit earlier. And of course, the annual exam, mammogram, is certainly is definitely recommended, as long as the self-exam is best, to preserve and support good health. There's been an interesting article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal stating that basically we still have a long way to go regarding to finding a cure to cancer. And keep in mind, although there has been research stating that you should do the mammogram in every 2 years, keep in mind it's your health that would be in jeopardy by waiting 2 years. Basically, the annual exam and the annual pap smears is the best way to go in order to support your health. Keep in mind the researcher's health is not in jeopardy, may not be in jeopardy, but yours could possibly be in jeopardy. And that concludes my comments and my remarks.
Thank you. CC1, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. The city clerk wanted me to remind all residents that the first week of December, she will have the demo vote machine located downstairs in her office and or the community room, and that's December, the first week of December, because she wants everyone to be aware of the new voting machines that will start taking place March 2020 election. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. CI1.
Initiative by Mayor James T. Butts, Jr., recommending the introduction of an ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the Inglewood Municipal Code by adding Article 9, Just Cause Eviction Protection, Article 10, Residential Rent Regulations, and Chapter 2, Article 3, Boards and Commissions, to add a rental housing board.
Mayor, did you want to speak first before we move to waive further reading?
Absolutely.
Or we may have other comments.
Absolutely. Well, so first of all, this has been around for quite some time. We had the first iteration, which we chose not to have a second reading on, and here are the substantive changes to this version. The cap has been dropped from 5% or the CPI, whichever is greater. There needs to be a change in the language for the composition of the Rent Control Board. And I don't remember the section right now, Mr. City Attorney, but we want to strike elected by the Rent Control Board for the chair, and the chair will be chosen by the mayor, and the other members will be chosen by the individual council members.
Mayor, that's on page 19, items 22 and line 22 and 23.
It is, but there's also, it still leaves in another section elected by the Rent Control Board.
Yes, but also that's right. Line 18 and 19 is where you identified that you would appoint the chair. So
right.
We need to extract that one sentence of 22 to 23.
Elected by the Rent Control Board.
Yes.
This adds a fee for the registration of units so that we realized from the moratorium that it's not going to be possible to administer this without some staff person or persons that are available to be contacted, so that everything doesn't go to an enforcement action or to court. And so we're going to have fees to administer this. Every rent control program, and ours, we call this housing protection, requires someone on staff to monitor and administer. The Rent Control Board is unelected and they are unpaid, appointed by the council, and I recommend that it stays that way. And finally, to reiterate what I was trying to get across to the landlords that spoke, the 3% was landed on for two reasons. One, all the landlords that came up and talked in all the times of this process have always said they never did more than 3%, and they never did it every year. We gave the 5% because it was a temporary moratorium and we didn't know, where to land. Secondly, I realized that 5% a year, because it's likely that landlords will do the full max every year that they can, will eliminate the ability of some people to pay within 5 years. We want people to be here when these jobs come online. And so this would limit increases to 3% or the CPI, whichever is greater for 5 years. And we hope that would be a max of 15%. And with a 35% local hire provision for these projects that are forthcoming, we feel that this will have a great impact on the residents' ability to do what everyone has to do, live with increases in cost. And this city is going to be more expensive than it was before. That's just a fact. When something's highly desirable, that's the whole basis of supply and demand. Finally, council members have reminded me that, at one time I discussed sunset, and in listening to the landlords and in looking at what I feel our goal should be to allow stabilized rents so that people can take care of themselves and be here, to be eligible for the local hire goals that we insist upon, that 5 years is a good window. And will be my motion and recommendation that the 3% or CPI terminate after year 5, and that we go to the state control rate of 5% or the CPI.
Mayor, just for clarity, and I want to second your motion because I think that motion that you just made kind of completes the goal that originally founded this effort, which means to give the opportunity to the current residents of Inglewood. I want to second that motion, and just for clarity, after the 5 years, we line up with the state's goals because theirs terminates in 10 years. So ultimately, that will stay in line for an additional 5 years.
Absolutely, and you're right that section alone will then mirror the state's controls as it relates to 5% or CPI and the same termination for the state's measure. But all the other measures will remain in place as applicable.
Which was the further clarity that I was asking, that means that our residents will get the additional service of not having to go to any state department for relief. They can still continue to come here.
Absolutely.
Because we will continue to have our department and just mirror our, okay.
Absolutely. And one more thing, the 5% for, and Councilman Padilla brought this up, the 5% cap or CPI for capital improvements that is existent right now will also be changed after year 5.
Okay. So I second that motion.
Before we call for the question, Mary, I do have a question or comment.
Councilman Franklin.
So there was a couple of units where you had worked with the landlords. Councilman Medea, you want to address that?
Well, no, that's what I was going to address. But
Go right ahead. No, go right ahead. I yield.
Go ahead.
Those are the 2 units we had talked about in the earlier discussions a few months back.
Yes.
And so those will also basically sunset in these 5 years?
It was an LLC, Regency 99, I believe was the name.
That's it. Yeah.
There were 2 buildings, and we entered into a settlement agreement with them before the moratorium was passed, and it was a multi-year agreement. And so what this ordinance does is specifically mentions them and exempts them from this because they came to an agreement before we passed the moratorium.
And that exemption will last the
5 years.
Okay. That's it for clarity.
5 years from the time that we went into agreement, not 5 years as of today.
Well, it depends on what we say. It's what we say. So what is the council's pleasure?
5 years from when this gets from this ordinance.
So we're uniformed.
So it's, we know exactly when it ends.
City Attorney had a question.
And before we take the vote, Mayor, on your amendment, does staff have a comment?
Mayor and council members, I just want you to be aware of the 5% or CPI cap for those that are under market. I would suggest that you sunset those as well, because if you don't, then those that are not under market will get more than those that are under market.
And that was definitely the motion.
intention.
That was in companion with the first sections that related to the termination of the 3%, the 5% plus CPI for capital improvements. That sunsets as well.
Capital improvements are under market.
Under
Oh, excuse me, I'm
80%
sorry,
as well.
for under market. I'm sorry,
Market.
for under market. That sunsets it well.
The city attorney had a comment.
Thank you. So we're going to have it effective. The 5 years is going to start when it's this particular
Second
ordinance?
reading.
After the second reading, or when it becomes effective, which is 30 days later?
30 days later, yes.
Is that the soonest it can be effective?
That would be the effective date.
Well, then that
And that's going to be approximately December 13th? Around December 5th then, approximately.
All right.
And what I heard is that you're requesting certain sections to be changed or modified to increase have an expiration date of 5 years.
Yes, after year 5.
That's the complete ordinance would basically sunset after 5 years.
Year 1 is 2020.
Correct. And the last one is as to the rental control board, that you wanted to delete the sections on page 19,
It says elected by the
lines 22 and
It
23.
relates to the chair.
Yeah, the 22, 23, that line did
and
be
the
removed.
chair will be
Yes.
removed.
And Mayor, I have
No,
one
that will
more-
be, that will sustain.
One more clarification.
Yours will sustain. It's removing of the board members
Yes,
elected
sir.
themselves. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank
One
you.
more clarifying question, Mayor.
Mhm.
And that is, since this will take effect, barring any incidents, for our process on December 5th, from today until then, we remain under the current
Moratorium.
That's just so that the public understands that we're not without one.
Yes, Councilman, that stays, I believe, until December 15th, until this one particularly
We
comes
make
into
it
place.
through the deadline. That was my question.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, there's a motion on the floor to sunset the provisions of 3% or CPI and the 5% or CPI after year 5, and with the understanding that year 1 is the year 2020, and that's my motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Oh, you already seconded
Yeah,
it. That's
you
right.
seconded it.
Madam Clerk.
Council members Padilla,
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Buds.
Aye. And then the second motion was to strike the phrase, and Councilman Franklin, as always, knows the exact section.
Page 19, line 22, 23.
Where it refers.
The board members shall select amongst themselves a chairperson or vice chair to be stricken, and that
Okay.
we continue in
Is that a
forth.
motion, Mayor?
And it's the motion to strike that section.
Yes, second.
Madam Clerk.
Council members Padilla,
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Buds.
Aye. And I want to make it clear that as it relates to the controls on the amount that rate can escalate, that after year 5, the city will mirror the
AB
state-
1482.
AB 1482?
Yes.
Will mirror the provisions for the controls of rent, and that's ordinance.
So I know we all have comments, Mayor,
Yes.
but I will make the motion to waive further reading, and we could comment before you introduce the ordinance.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Council members Padilla,
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Mayor Buds.
Aye. Let's see.
Alex, have something.
So, Alex, Councilman Padilla, did you have a comment?
Well, look, all I wanted to say is this is a long process, and as we've discussed in the past here with you all, you know, we've heard from the renters, we've heard from the landlords. We try to find something in the middle. We understand not everybody's going to be happy. You know, it depends on where you're at, whether you're Ford, you like the Fords or you like Chevys. But we as a council have to make a decision that's best for our community. And we do that by accepting input, and we listen to staff to get their input. They go out and do all the research. So with that, I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank staff for putting together, along with the city manager, city attorney, all these folks, you know, to put together a comprehensive rent initiative here, ordinance. And, you know, some folks, you know, everybody's very passionate, and we understand that. But that being said, I think this is probably going to be looked at as one of the best rent ordinances around. I think other cities are going to look at this and they're going to say, wow, Inglewood had the thought process early on to think about these different avenues to try to address these rent control issues that are going on in their community. That being said, thank you all for coming out, and thank you for your patience and your compassion.
Okay, I'll introduce the ordinance. Councilman Franklin, did you have any comments?
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for recognizing me. I clearly want to identify that this city council, on more than one occasion, have made some tough love decisions. We're the ones that embarked in this issue for rental housing protection ordinance way before the state got involved and other cities got involved. And we understand the compassion of the number of landlords that have come before us, as well as renters. I think it's a clear message that when you identify, as the renters have embedded their remarks to me about, I don't get a 3% raise every year, let alone a 5%. So how am I going to be able to stabilize my ability to continue to stay here when the economic wolf continues to come after me with other issues of concern, whether it's vehicles, gas at $4 plus a gallon, and then the retail merchandise I wish to buy continues to go up, up, up. The economic wolf is taking my paycheck. And then you're talking about the rent for me to keep a roof over my head. I echo the same sentiments when it comes to renters becoming homeless, because there was not an avenue for them to be able to come with some reasonable ability to be able to maintain their current rental status within their current location that they dwell. The other concern that I raised had to do with the fact that as soon as the word rent protection took place, some of the greedy landlords made the papers at the expense of so many others that have always stayed within the realm of embracing those renters. And so because of that, it has now caused the economic wolf to rise to the occasion for us to address. And I just want to commend this council on their due diligence, their commitment, instead of kicking the can down the road and let the state do it, that we took on the tough love decisions and we made it happen. And so I thank all the council members for their due diligence.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Morales.
Thank you. I think this is the kind of action that makes you feel like you have to say something, because we've all gone through such a big process in ourselves, right, to come to what we believe is good. Today actually began with us all sitting up here a while back and saying we were all against rent control. That's how it all began. Then what ended up happening is that certain residents were receiving serious increases that were life-changing. There was no way around it. They had to leave. And so that required us to respond in a different way. But it started again with us being completely against it. We needed to address that for the residents. Our goal became, the mayor did a good job of explaining that we are seeing this positive evolution of our city and all of the benefits that come with it. And we would be making it extremely difficult for our current renting residents to benefit from the growth that they were part of. And that was something that we just couldn't accept. That was a big social cost. So the mayor brought forward the introduction of the rent ordinance. We took a look at it. We started to evolve with it. We all got hundreds of calls, hundreds of folks approaching us with it. And it's no secret, owners on one side, renters on the other ones, zero versus unlimited. That was kind of everything and everything in between. But we are doing something today that I believe keeps our residents here, to be able to give them an opportunity, and does so in a way that says this is who we're looking out for. And that I commend with the final amendment of the 5-year sunset, because that addresses that. That says that's exactly why we did it. We did it for the residents that exist here. We understand our role is not to create housing for the entire world. Our goal is to give an opportunity for the owners to develop themselves as a business, and give an opportunity for the residents to succeed in our city. The owners, I congratulate them for always being great owners and seldomly raising rent. and keeping their residents. I congratulate them. The 3% is something that they will have to accept for the next 5 years. But other than that, remember, they have received a significant amount of equity based on the value that has come with all of this resurgence of business here in the city of Inglewood. So we are in it together, and we're here trying to balance everything. There are some exemptions which should help. Now, the fact that new projects are not going to be under the cap, that helps to motivate the continuing growth of our housing crop. The Clippers have set aside, I believe, Mayor, $75 million to put into that kind of program. So this is something that's happening in our city. Alex just mentioned it'll be one of the better ones around. I believe so. I believe so. I know it was well thought out. Now, is it perfect? No. There is no perfect ordinance such as this. But the one thing we know is that we cannot stop growth. We cannot stop growth, and we cannot stop the economy. What we can do here is establish smart growth in our city. And that's what we're taking a step towards today, which is something that I'm actually very proud of. It has not been easy for me to come to terms with everything on here. And we know that the landlords deserve to grow as a business, but we also know that the renters deserve an opportunity. So I just, congratulations, Mayor, for bringing that forward, and the council itself for kind of giving input throughout the days. I know we all went through it. So thank you.
Well, you know, I hate to speak last because these guys are so darn intelligent. And I really hate to speak after Eloy, but one of the things that he said that is so cogent, he said it's not perfect. You know why it's not perfect? Because capitalism isn't perfect. Not perfect. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to modify the hand of the way the economy works in this country so that we give people the most opportunity to participate in the construction of their own destiny. That's why whenever I hear people complain about, oh, the Clippers are coming, there's too much traffic, then you might as well say there are too many jobs, because there's never enough jobs. There's never enough opportunity. I want to thank the staff people that worked on this, Melanie McDade, Yakima Decatur. Yakima has done a fantastic job. You know, I'm the final editor, I'm the idea person, but let me tell you something. This is a fantastic piece of work. Fantastic piece of work. And so while it isn't perfect, it's because the system that we operate under is not perfect, but it's the best there is in the world. And so what we choose to do, we choose in all of our development agreements, in every deal that we do, is to try and maximize the community benefits for the people in this community. And this is a result of a turning of the council from we didn't want to stifle property values, we didn't want to stifle growth, to realizing that there were people that really were buying buildings and raising the rents to meet their new mortgages plus, and that just wasn't going to work. And so, you know, I think that the council's done made a balanced approach and been very courageous. And I really want to thank my colleagues and thank all the staff. I want to thank the city manager, everyone that had a hand in this, because this is not perfect, but it's fair. CSA 2.
Approval of the minutes of the successor agency meetings held on October 1, October 8th, and October 15, 2019.
Move approval.
Madam Clerk.
Successor agency members Padilla.
Aye.
Morales. Franklin.
Aye.
Chairman Butts.
Aye. Adjourn the successor agency. H2.
Approval of the minutes of the Housing Authority meetings held on October 1, October 8th, and October 15, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Housing Authority members Padilla.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Chairman Butts.
Aye. Adjourn the Housing Authority. F1.
Approval of the minutes of the Finance Authority meetings held on October 1, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Finance Authority members Padilla.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Franklin.
Aye.
Chairman Butts.
Aye. P1.
Approval of the minutes of the Parking Authority meeting held on October 1, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Parking Authority members Padilla,
Aye.
Morales,
Aye.
Franklin,
Aye.
Chairman Buds.
Aye. Adjourn the Parking Authority. The Joint Powers Authority is in session. JPA 1.
Approval of the minutes of the Joint Powers Authority meeting held on October 1, 2019, October 8, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Joint Powers Authority members Padilla,
Aye.
Morales,
Aye.
Franklin,
Aye.
Chairman Buds.
Aye. Adjourn the JPA. Public comment. Any person wishing to address the council on any matter connected with city business not elsewhere considered on the agenda may do so at this time. 1 minute.
You got a really productive meeting, it seemed like this time. I wanted to comment on something that was about 3 weeks ago when MTA came out and made their presentation, and they just talked about building a people mover from the market stop at the.
But that wasn't MTA. That was a consultant for the city. That's a concept of the city of Inglewood.
Are we working on going where I'm going with that is we need to work on it going all the way over to the Green Line at Crenshaw.
Money permits.
Well,
With money permits.
well, hold on. No, what this is to do is to be a connector from the Green Line, from the station that's closest to Market and Florence, and then take you over Market Street, over Manchester, over Prairie, to the three venues in the entertainment district. And that's the purpose.
Yeah, but it needs to go further. It needs to go all over to, say, Imperial, the Green Line station at Crenshaw, and all of it hooked together.
I hear you, and the beauty of it is modular, and so that's an option for the future. But the immediate need is to remove the thousands of cars from the road.
That'll move a whole bunch more if you do, because it'll cut off the stadium from Long Beach and all those other places.
I don't disagree with you.
All about the Benjamins.
It would be great if there's
and if you have the money.
Well, try harder, dig deeper. You raise taxes anyway, right?
I'm glad you said it, Bill.
Hi, my name is Rahab Mitchell, and I'm here to request that Public Works synchronize the lights from the freeway to the Forum so that the senior citizens at Hillcrest and Locust at Manchester have more time to cross the streets going north-south. The cars fly through on the way from that freeway. The lights are never synchronized. Cars are in between. You have to walk in between when the light does work for the pedestrians to go. They're walking in between cars. I have to hold my hand up to make cars stop. So I'm asking that they look at synchronizing those lights, that they take into account the hearing impaired, the visually impaired, mobility impaired, and the aged. And also the youth at the Inglewood High School, that crosswalk crossing over to the library to the City Hall only allows them a very short number of seconds to cross that street. I don't know who's doing it, what timing you look like, but a senior citizen on a walker takes more time to get across the street. A visually impaired person, hearing impaired, and the aged take more time to get across that street. And I've seen you at Vaughn's Market. You know that light that I'm talking about.
Glad that you saw me at Vaughn's Market.
Yeah, and so I'm letting you know what corner I'm talking about, that specific
I know the
place
intersection. I do.
where those poor seniors have to cross. And I've actually acted like a school crossing guard to hold my hand up to make the people stop to let those seniors. Also, I ask that you put a drop-down light so that the cars that are crossing north going on there are not allowed to turn until they are given permission, because as soon as they see that green light go, they don't care about a walking sign being up. So you have to make them stop to let the pedestrians cross. So I'm just asking, appealing and going on record before there are more tragedies. I do know that people have been harmed on that corner and hit, and I have called twice for Public Works to synchronize the lights on that corner. So I'd like for you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Latasha Bailey, and I'd like to say good afternoon to everybody. And you guys are doing a very good job. I've been contacting the city on different issues because I live right across the street from Centinela Park. I've been able to get quite a few things done by calling them and just asking to get things done. But there's one more issue that I'm still concerned about because I think that it's an issue of they don't know whose jurisdiction is in charge of the trees that are inside of the park that are right on the electrical wires. It's a safety concern for me because when it's wintertime, the trees have fell on my property twice. And they've shaved them down somewhat, but the trees are still on the electrical wires. So I've contacted Public Works. I've also contacted the county because the county of Los Angeles also came out and cleaned out some sewers and other things that are along that area right there. But I'm not sure. And I don't know if they're unsure also because it hasn't been done. But every other thing that I've called about has been taken care of with the exception of that.
Wonderful. And where was this tree?
It's Centinela Park, and it's right on East Parkway. It's the entrance where they go in to go to the soccer field or the field right
so
there.
So up on the east end of the park.
Yes.
As you come into the parking lot?
Yeah, but the trees are along the front side of my property.
See, this is what I'm trying to figure
get the
out.
street.
They're inside of the park. I'm sorry.
They're inside the park.
Inside of the park.
Okay.
But they're coming over.
So I get it. So are they on the eastern border of the park? You see what I'm saying? If
Trying to get the
which one?
Parking lot, and then there's a wall.
Yeah. Are they next to a wall?
They're next to the sidewalk. There's a walkway.
But there has to be a wall, right? Or also,
a wall.
So you're talking
There's a little old fence.
It's an east-west street. Are they along an east-west street or are they along a north-south street?
The street is called East Parkway.
7th, and here's the parking lot, and there's like
got it
fence right here. Where
So the
this is
entrance of the
soccer
park is
field
at
right
968th Street.
Got it.
Yeah.
We'll send somebody out to look at it.
Yeah, there's not very many people on that street, so
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, because you're against you called it a old raggedy fence, but it's the fence that goes the furthest.
I didn't
east,
say
right?
raggedy, sir.
I said that. I said that raggedy part, but it was old. But it's the one that's furthest east, where then there's the opening to go into the parking lot right after that, and your home is right over here. There's a little walkway right here.
No, my house is directly across the street.
Across the street from that. Yeah.
Mr. City Manager, would you got it? Okay. We got you.
Thank you.
All right.
My name is Willie A.G., and man, can I get an extra minute?
You sure can. Everybody else has.
There you go. I'm a little bit upset.
Oh, no, now you don't get any time at all.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of the farm. But I'm not proud of what Madison Square Garden wants to do to this city. In my opinion, Madison Square Garden wants to run the city. They might run New York City, but I don't think with this council they'll ever be able to do it. And I just want to say this. I love the Clippers. What other city get $100 million to help its citizens? Where? No place. Nowhere in the country. $100 million to help people that need it. I don't need it, but there's a lot of people that do need it. I sympathize with people, that have it rough, but, I believe if you do too much for people, then they'll stop doing for themselves. This is America, and that's what we're about. I've been here 54 years, and I've never seen a council like we got here. And I'm sure you guys going to take care of business and bring the Clippers to Inglewood. And if Madison Square Garden succeeds in defeating it, every citizen in the city of Inglewood need to march around the Forum and never let them have another play there as long as they're here until they move out. We can close down Kareem Court. We can close down 90th Street. They bought the Forum. They didn't buy the city. Look at I have comments. Look at him sitting over there. You ready?
I like that statement.
Thank you very much. Just do what you've been doing for years. Keep Inglewood number one.
Mr. Bailey, should have been closer. Eli's getting sleepy. It's getting late.
I don't sleep when Stuart comes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hello, and I hope everybody and their families are doing well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, and city staff. This afternoon, I will be talking about the $100 million that Mr. Balmer has committed to our city. Not foreseeable yet, but we will be getting it as soon as we get all this red tape out of his way. As soon as you guys get it out of the way, anyway. So, the construction isn't really due to start till 2021, if I am correct. All right?
Probably 2022 if things go well.
Okay, that's fine. And the completion date will be 2024.
Has to be.
Okay. And the $100 million, I hope we will be getting. But what I want to basically say about this whole thing is we need, as a city, to stay very patient. Our governor said he's not going to interfere with the process of the EIR or the air quality management district stuff. That's fine. He want to play that game. We can play it too. We're very patient people. We can wait till 2021 to get the $100 million. No problem. You already know how you're going to spend it. It's good. Patience is the virtue that we, as citizens of Inglewood, understand. So I hear you have something you want to say, and I'm going to end with that. Thank you very much, and thank you for your due diligence for the citizens.
Well, Stuart, let me just make it very clear.
Yes, sir.
Right now, we're not at any point of finality for this project. The EIR has to be posted. The comment period has to end. Then that would invoke the Assembly Bill 987, which allows only 9 months for challenges to the EIR and adjudication by a court. But before that section comes to effect, the California Air Resources Board findings have to be finalized, and then we go into that process. So this is not a done deal yet. We're not going to get any money in 2020, 2021. That's not true. There's a lot of things to go, moving parts. That being said, we tend to be successful here in the city of Inglewood. And as I said once, I'm sure it'll happen. I'm 80% sure. My 80% is better than most 99s, all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and have a great week, everyone.
All right. Okay, with that, we'll close public comment. Are there any more council comments? Councilman Padilla?
I just want to thank everybody for coming out. We did a lot of heavy discussions today, and again, just thank you for being out here and being a part of what we're doing here in this beautiful city. Thanks.
Councilman Franklin?
Yes, point of clarity, Mayor. I just want to give credit where credit is due. It was Councilman Padilla that brought it, that we were digressing regarding the ordinance that resurrected the difference between the appointment by the mayor versus the election within the board itself. So I just want to get that clarified. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge that this past Saturday, there was a Metro workshop. And it was great attendance. I was in attendance at the Lenox Public Library. There's a number of bus lines that we're weighing in on changing the headway or the time that they arrive and the frequencies, rerouting them. And so we wanted public comment, particularly if you're a public writer. And so we had a great audience that came before us and addressed their concerns, of which we will then take back and present it to the Metro Board, which is our mayor, who's the chair, on our recommendations in concurrence with the comments we received from the writers in the South Bay area. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Councilman Morales, District 3.
Thank you all for coming out. A lot of heavy lifting, like Alex said, and great meeting. Thank you.
Okay, on Saturday, November 2nd, between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., the A line is going to be brought back into service. It's the old blue line. It goes from downtown 7th and Flower, which is known as 7th and Metro, to Long Beach. There are going to be 3 different venues for this celebration. There will also be free rides for 3 days on the resurrected blue line. And it's going to be an event. Mayor Garcetti will be at the 103rd and Watts, the Watts Tower Station. Councilman Buscaino, I believe, and Mayor Garcia of Long Beach, who's also on the board, will be at the Long Beach Station. And Snoop Dogg and I will be running a program that will originate at 7th and Flower, and there'll be big screen televisions, and the KJLH will be there. And so it's going to be quite a production. So anyone that wants to come out, you're welcome to come out. It's one of the pleasures of being the chair of Metro, that I get to work on Saturday doing something else. But anyway, thank you very much for coming. Great meeting, and thank everybody for their input. We're adjourned.